My life as a police officer was a tapestry of routine, grit, and the familiar hum of the city. Then, one moment, everything shattered. Metal twisted, sirens screamed, and suddenly I was floating above my own body, watching paramedics fight for a life I thought was already gone. They said my heart stopped, not just once, but twice, for a total of 8 minutes. Yet in that timeless void, I experienced hours encountering realms and wisdom that defy earthly explanation. What happens when the veil between worlds thins and you're pulled into the very heart of existence itself?
Looking back, I realize how much I clung to the tangible, the verifiable. Life was a series of facts, figures, and observable phenomena. I never imagined a reality where the very fabric of existence could unravel, only to reweave itself into something so profoundly, impossibly beautiful. Before April 1, 1998, I was Thomas, a name that felt as solid and unremarkable as the suburban streets I patrolled. My days began before dawn, the aroma of stale coffee clinging to my uniform as I prepared for another shift. For years, being a police officer wasn't just a job, it was my identity, a calling steeped in the conviction that I was making a tangible difference in the world. I thrived on the structure, the clear lines between right and wrong, and the quiet satisfaction of bringing order to chaos. My beat was in a mid-sized American city, a place where the mundane often brushed shoulders with moments of unexpected drama. I lived in a modest house with a routine that rarely deviated: work, gym, a quiet evening with a book, and the comforting predictability of it all. My character, I suppose, could be described as pragmatic, perhaps even a touch cynical. I was good at my job because I saw things as they were, unvarnished and often messy. Empathy was a tool, not a guiding principle. Something you deployed to de-escalate a situation, not to lose yourself in. My hobbies were simple: solitary pursuits, a bit of fishing on my rare days off, tinkering with my old truck in the garage, anything that allowed me to work with my hands and keep my thoughts to myself. My world was very much here and now, grounded in the observable. Childhood memories, though, held a softer hue. I remember the worn leather of my grandfather's baseball mitt, the scent of fresh-cut grass on a summer evening as he taught me to throw. He was a quiet man, but his presence was a constant, steady anchor. There was also the sting of my first real heartbreak in high school, the feeling of the world collapsing in on itself only to slowly, painfully rebuild. These weren't grand, transformative moments, but rather small, significant brushstrokes that painted the canvas of who I was: resilient, self-reliant, a little guarded. Emotionally, I would have told you I was content, not overflowing with joy, perhaps, but certainly not unhappy. There was a quiet hum of purpose, a satisfaction in a job well done. Yet, looking back, I can see the subtle undertones of a hidden restlessness, a low-frequency hum beneath the surface of my calm exterior. It wasn't despair, but more of an unarticulated longing for something. I didn't know what that something was, and frankly, I wasn't actively looking for it. My days were full enough, my problems manageable, my life neatly contained within the boundaries I had drawn it for me. When it came to life and death, my views were, by and large, shaped by my upbringing and my profession. I was raised Baptist, then later converted to Catholicism, but my faith was more of a cultural inheritance than a burning conviction. God was a concept, a distant, benevolent architect who set the universe in motion and then largely let it run its course. Death was simply the end, the cessation of existence, a biological process. You lived, you worked, you died. The afterlife, if it existed at all, was a comforting fable for those who needed it, a pleasant thought for Sunday mornings. I certainly didn't dwell on it. My encounters with death in my line of work only reinforced this pragmatic view. A body on the asphalt, a cold sheet pulled over a face. It was grim, irreversible, and final. There was no grand mystery, no shimmering portal, just nothing. I believed in what I could see, what I could touch, what I could process with my five senses. Little did I know, the universe was about to shatter every single one of those assumptions.
That morning felt like any other. The sun rose, the city stirred, and I slipped into the familiar rhythm of my patrol. There were no flashing red signs, no ominous shadows stretching across my path, just the mundane hum of existence, utterly oblivious to the profound, irreversible shift awaiting me just hours later. April 1st, 1998. It started like any other Wednesday. The morning light filtered through the blinds of my small bedroom, painting familiar patterns on the wall. The scent of brewing coffee, my ritualistic first step into the day, mingled with the faint metallic tang of my police uniform, freshly pressed and hanging by the door. I went through the motions with an almost unconscious efficiency. Shower, shave, a quick breakfast of toast and eggs, the quiet clink of cutlery against ceramic. The news played softly on the kitchen radio, a droning backdrop of local politics and weather forecasts, none of it hinting at the tectonic shift my world was about to undergo. I remember the chill of the morning air as I stepped out, a crispness that promised a clear spring day. My cruiser, a Ford Crown Victoria, gleamed under the nascent sun, its familiar interior a second skin. I ran through my mental checklist, patrol routes, recent calls, the general ebb and flow of the city I was tasked to protect. There was a sense of calm, a quiet competence that came from years on the force. My shift began, and the hours unfolded predictably. A traffic stop, a minor dispute handled, the usual paperwork. The rhythm was soothing, almost hypnotic. The call came around midday, a seemingly routine incident that quickly unraveled. A multi-vehicle collision on the highway, reports of injuries, traffic backing up for miles. My mind immediately shifted into assessment mode, prioritize safety, secure the scene, render aid. I navigated through the gridlock, the flashing lights of my cruiser painting urgent streaks across the asphalt. As I approached the scene, the chaos became clearer. Twisted metal, shattered glass, the faint scent of gasoline mingling with something acrid and metallic. It was a chaotic symphony of human suffering, unfortunately, all too familiar. I positioned my vehicle to block off the lane, a standard procedure. That's when it happened. In the blink of an eye, a screech of tires, a deafening roar, and then a seismic impact. It wasn't just a bump or a fender bender. It was an explosion of force, a violent, instantaneous collision that sent my world spinning. My police cruiser, once a fortress of steel, crumpled around me like a tin can. The impact was so sudden, so all-consuming, that there was no time for fear, no moment for a conscious thought beyond the sheer, concussive force. There were no premonitions, no subtle whispers of fate that morning. Life had been stubbornly, reassuringly normal right up until the moment of impact. The absence of any forewarning only amplified the shock. One moment I was a police officer, doing my job, grounded in the tactile reality of my patrol car. The next I was pinned, the air knocked from my lungs, and the world outside reduced to a symphony of groans, shouts, and the agonizing creak of tortured metal. I could feel the sharp, biting pain, a searing fire spreading through my lower body, but even that felt distant, dulled by the sheer enormity of what had just occurred. The scent of ozone, burning rubber, and my own fear filled the confined space. I was trapped, utterly and completely, and the tension in the air was palpable, thick with the weight of unseen dangers and the dawning realization that my life, in its familiar form, had just irrevocably changed.
Then, without warning, the pain vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. I was no longer Thomas, the police officer trapped in mangled steel, but something boundless, watching my own body from above. The vibrant white light beckoned, pulling me into a reality more profound and loving than anything I could have ever conceived. The world fractured. After the deafening impact, the initial searing pain was a brutal, all-consuming fire in my right leg and hip. I was pinned, the weight of the crushed metal a suffocating vice around me. My breath hitched, shallow and ragged, and a cold, creeping numbness began to spread from my extremities, battling with the intense pain. I could hear the distant wail of sirens, the muffled shouts of people, but it all seemed to recede, as if viewed through a thick pane of distorted glass. Time stretched and warped, each second an eternity of agonizing stillness. Rescue came with a blur of faces and the urgent slice of specialized tools. The excruciating process of extraction began, a symphony of grinding metal and controlled chaos. Every movement sent fresh jolts of agony through my battered body, but even as they pulled me free, a strange detachment began to set in. It was as if my consciousness, battered and bruised, was beginning to retreat from the physical vessel. They loaded me onto a stretcher, and then into the waiting helicopter, the rotors a thudding heartbeat above me. Inside the cramped cabin, the flight nurse and medic moved with practiced urgency. I could feel the cold, clammy sweat on my skin, the rising nausea, and the terrifying sensation of my vision narrowing, as if a dark curtain was being drawn inward. They were talking about blood loss, about internal injuries. I remember the sharp prick of an IV, the cold rush of fluid, and then a sudden, profound lurch within my chest. My heart, a tireless drumbeat my entire life, simply stopped. One moment I was aware of the frantic movements around me, the medic's strained face, the nurse barking commands. The next, it was as if I had simply lifted. It wasn't a push or a pull or any sensation of effort. It was an effortless, almost graceful separation, like a wisp of smoke rising from a dying fire. My perspective shifted, floating upward, and suddenly I was looking down. Below me, on the floor of the helicopter, was my body. It lay pale and inert, surrounded by the flurry of activity. I watched with a bizarre clinical detachment as the flight crew worked on me. I saw the grim determination on the flight nurse's face as she began rhythmic compressions on my chest. Her voice, clear and sharp, even amidst the thrumming rotors, pierced through the surreal scene. "You're not going to die on my bird, not on my shift." They saw them inserting a tube into my mouth, a stark white line against my pale lips, and then a tourniquet, cinched tight around my right leg and hip, a desperate attempt to staunch the blood that still seeped. It was me down there, yet it wasn't. There was no pain, no fear, only an immense, profound tranquility. My consciousness was sharper, more alert than it had ever been. I could perceive every detail, every nuanced expression with a clarity that transcended normal human sight. As the moments stretched,
The helicopter itself began to appear smaller, receding into the distance below me, like a toy shrinking into a vast expanse. The sense of detachment deepened, but it was not cold or frightening. Instead, it was liberating, a shedding of all earthly burdens. Then an unbidden, powerful urge to turn around welled up within me, an irresistible pull to see what lay behind this familiar, receding world. When I did, it was as if I had pivoted on the axis of existence itself.
The blackness that greeted me was unlike any I had ever known. It wasn't the absence of light, but rather a rich, velvety void that somehow felt alive, pregnant with possibility. And within that infinite dark, a tunnel materialized. It wasn't a physical tunnel of earth or rock, but a shimmering conduit, and at its far end, a light. This was no ordinary light. It pulsed with an incandescent brilliance, a pure crystalline light that was utterly dazzling, yet caused no discomfort to my senses. It radiated an almost palpable warmth, an invitation that was both gentle and compelling. I felt an undeniable pull towards it, a gentle current guiding me forward. And with each infinitesimal movement closer, the sense of peace deepened, blooming into an intoxicating tranquility that permeated my very essence. All the anxieties, all the fears, all the earthly concerns that had ever plagued me simply dissolved into nothingness. As I drew nearer, the light encompassed me, not blindingly, but like a warm, loving embrace. I was no longer moving towards the light, I was within it, permeated by its glorious essence. Within this luminous tunnel, I began to perceive presences. They weren't solid, corporeal forms, but rather shimmering outlines, fields of energy that coalesced into recognizable yet ethereal figures. They lined both sides of the luminous pathway. On my left, a wave of profound introspection washed over me. I saw, or rather felt, the presence of people I had wronged in my life. Moments of dishonesty, instances of selfishness, fleeting betrayals, times I had cheated or taken what wasn't mine. There was no judgment, no condemnation from these forms, only a pure, unadulterated reflection of my actions, experienced through their perspective. It was an immediate, visceral understanding of the ripple effect of my choices, a stark yet gentle truth laid bare. On my right, however, the sensations were entirely different. Here, I recognized faces filled with boundless love and gratitude. These were the people I had genuinely helped as a police officer, the lost child I had reunited with their parents, the victim I had protected, the distressed individual I had offered a kind word to. There were also the faces of those who had loved me unconditionally, my family and friends, and to my immense surprise, the luminous forms of my beloved pets, dogs and cats from my past, radiating pure, unadulterated affection. Their presence was a balm, a silent testament to the positive impact I had made, a counterpoint to the difficult reflections on the left. The understanding of cause and effect, of karma, was instantaneous and absolute, delivered not as a lecture, but as a pure, knowing embrace. Suddenly, the tunnel dissolved, and I was thrust into an expansive, luminous chamber. It was vast, teeming with a silent, fluid movement of countless presences, like a cosmic grand central station, where souls moved with a sense of purpose and direction. There was a large polished counter, and behind it a figure. He appeared to be a man, though his form shimmered with an inner light, making him seem both human and utterly divine. He awaited me with an air of infinite patience and profound wisdom. Before him lay a massive book, its pages illuminated from within by a soft, ethereal glow. It was breathtakingly beautiful, each page seemingly alive with an untold history.
"What is your name?" he communicated directly into my mind, his lips unmoving. His voice was not a sound, but a direct download of pure thought, clear and resonant within my consciousness. I gave him my earthly nickname, the one I use day to day. He corrected me, telepathically, with a gentle firmness. "Your legal name, not your nickname or earthly name." I offered my full formal name, and he nodded, or rather conveyed assent. He opened the magnificent, luminous book, and his fingers, long and translucent, riffled through its glowing pages with impossible speed. Finally, he paused, his glowing finger resting on a specific point. "Nope," he conveyed, the thought settling in my mind with absolute certainty. "Your time has not expired yet." There was no judgment, no anger, just a simple, undeniable fact. As this profound exchange registered, I turned my attention, and there, directly in front of me, stood my grandfather. He was exactly as I remembered him, yet radiating an inner light and vitality far beyond anything I had known on earth. He had passed away 6 years prior, but in this realm, the concept of time felt meaningless, and his presence was as real and tangible as my own. He reached out, taking my hand, and the warmth of his touch was like pure, unadulterated love. He whisked me away, not with physical motion, but with an instantaneous shift in perception, to a place just outside the vast chamber. Here I beheld a pond, but calling it a pond felt like a gross inadequacy, a pathetic earthly label for such divine beauty. The water was unbelievably clear, so pure it seemed to hum with life, radiating a glorious iridescent light from within its depths. The sun, a source of light unlike any earthly star, was just cresting the horizon, casting colors that defied description. Hues of gold, rose, and sapphire blended and shifted in an ever-changing tapestry of celestial light. The air was permeated with a pervasive sense of peace, a tranquility so profound that every fiber of my being resonated with it. It was a silence filled with infinite wisdom, a stillness that thrummed with the very presence of God and his angels. And then the music. It wasn't heard with ears, but felt deep within the soul, a symphony of such exquisite harmony and beauty that it transcended all human comprehension. It was the sound of existence, of divine love, of ultimate truth. My grandfather looked at me, his gaze full of love so vast it brought tears to my ethereal eyes. "Do not be afraid, Thomas," he communicated, his thoughts flowing into mine like a gentle, knowing stream. "This is heaven." He then conveyed something that resonated with a deep, ancient truth within me. "I cannot show you God yet, for it is not your time, but someday I will. God is going to help you re-enter the living, and it is going to hurt. The pain will be temporary, not forever." The words were not spoken, but understood, felt, absorbed into the very fabric of my being. He reiterated, "It is not your time. Your time in heaven is limited." I then felt, rather than saw, the comforting presences of other deceased family members, their love enveloping me in a warm, protective embrace. Their collective presence was a silent affirmation of his words, a gentle push back towards the life I hadn't finished.
In this timeless space, I experienced a rapid yet incredibly thorough panorama of my life. It wasn't like watching a movie, it was like being every moment again from every perspective, my actions, my words, my thoughts. Everything was laid bare, not for judgment, but for pure understanding. I felt the joy I had given and the pain I had inadvertently caused. There was an all-encompassing knowledge of the interconnectedness of everything, how a small act of kindness could ripple outwards, how a careless word could wound. I re-experienced the emotional impact of my choices on others, a profound lesson in empathy delivered not through teaching, but through direct experience. I saw where my cynicism had built walls, where my pragmatism had blinded me to the deeper truths of human connection. The review was incredibly fast, yet I comprehended every nuance, every consequence. It was a distillation of my earthly journey, revealing the profound simplicity of love as the ultimate currency. And then, the overwhelming, all-encompassing feeling of unity. It was the core, the absolute essence of this realm. Every fiber of my being vibrated with a profound connection to everything, to the shimmering pond, to the celestial light, to the countless presences around me, to the very fabric of existence. There was no separation, no me and them, only us, intertwined in an infinite tapestry of pure, unconditional love. This wasn't an emotion I felt, it was the very nature of reality, the fundamental truth upon which everything rested. It was a love that asked nothing, judged nothing, simply was. It was the source of all joy, all peace, all understanding. In this ocean of love, I grasped that ministry, a calling I had subconsciously felt for years, was indeed my path, my purpose, not just for myself, but for the universal good. God wasn't just a distant architect. God was this love, this unity, this ever-present force, urging me to embrace my true calling, to spread this love, to simply do it. All truths revealed themselves in this boundless state. I understood that life continued beyond the physical form, that consciousness was not extinguished by death, but merely transformed. I glimpsed the profound meaning of love not as a fleeting emotion, but as the fundamental building block of the universe. It was an intellectual and spiritual awakening that transcended all prior knowledge, all earthly concepts. I was bathed in an absolute understanding, a feeling of being all-knowing, where recognition was instantaneous, unburdened by the linear process of thought. I perceived that love, specifically the presence of Jesus, permeated this heavenly realm, an active, loving force in everything I experienced. My grandfather's words echoed the deepest truth I now understood, that love is Jesus and love is heaven.
One moment, I was bathed in an otherworldly light, conversing with my grandfather in a realm of pure love. The next, a brutal, jarring pull, and I was back, slammed into a body that felt alien and broken, assaulted by the harsh reality of pain and the cold, clinical sounds of the emergency room. The transition was abrupt, violent even. There was no gentle fade, no soft landing. One moment, I was enveloped in the boundless love and peace of that transcendent realm, immersed in the profound wisdom of my grandfather's presence and the universal truth of unconditional love. The next, it was as if an invisible, immensely powerful hand had seized me and yanked me back, not gently, but with a force that sent a sickening jolt through what felt like my entire being. The light, the peace, the understanding, it all vanished in an instant, replaced by a suffocating darkness and a sudden, crushing weight. It was like being violently shoved back into a suit of armor that was too small, too heavy, and filled with agony. The pain, which had been utterly absent in the ethereal realm, roared back to life with a vengeance, a searing white-hot fire in my right leg and hip that eclipsed all other sensations. My lungs instinctively gasped, but the air felt thick and heavy, each breath a struggle. Nausea churned in my stomach, and a profound disorientation washed over me. I was Thomas again, trapped within a physical shell,
and the contrast with the expansive freedom I had just experienced was almost unbearable. My first coherent thought was a bewildered, desperate whisper. No, I was just there. I was home. There was an overwhelming sense of loss, a profound grief for the paradise I had been torn from. It wasn't fear, not in the traditional sense, but a deep existential disappointment, a longing for a state of being I now knew existed but could no longer access. The familiar hum of the helicopter was gone, replaced by the cacophony of a bustling trauma center. I could hear voices, urgent and professional, but they were distant, muffled, as if speaking through layers of cotton. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt impossibly heavy, glued shut. My body felt utterly alien, a broken vessel barely held together. Every muscle ached, every joint screamed in protest. I was cold, clammy, and the air around me felt sterile, devoid of the vibrant energy of the realm I had left. I could feel hands on me, prodding, pushing, securing. I heard snippets of conversation. Stabilize the heart. Control the bleeding. Medically induced coma. The words floated above me, detached and clinical, a stark reminder of the fragile reality I had returned to. There was an awareness of tubes, wires, and restraints binding me to this painful existence.
When I finally managed to surface, 10 days later, I was in the intensive care unit. The initial haze slowly cleared, replaced by a gnawing hunger, a parched throat, and a body that felt like it had been run over by a train. The nurses were kind, their faces a blur of concern and gentle efficiency. But it was the doctor who delivered the news that truly shocked me. A clinical pronouncement that jolted me more profoundly than the accident itself. "Officer," he said, his voice calm, professional, "you're incredibly lucky. You had a rough time in the helicopter." He went on to explain it in blunt medical terms. "Your heart stopped. Twice. We had you down for about 4 minutes each time. A total of 8 minutes. 8 minutes!" The words hung in the air, cold and definitive. But in that 8 minutes, I had lived lifetimes. I had seen my grandfather, traversed through a tunnel of pure light, experienced unconditional love, and gained an understanding of existence that defied earthly comprehension. What he saw as a brief medical blip, I knew was an eternity of profound transformation. My immediate reaction was to share it, to try and bridge the chasm between their reality and mine. I wasn't here," I rasped, my throat raw. "I was somewhere else. I saw my grandfather. He told me it wasn't my time." The words tumbled out, disjointed and urgent, driven by an overwhelming need to articulate the ineffable. The doctor listened patiently, his expression unreadable, a faint crease appearing between his brows. He nodded, then looked at the nurse. "We'll have the hospital chaplain come speak with him," he said, his voice quiet, almost dismissive. It was clear he viewed my words as the ramblings of a man emerging from trauma, a side effect of oxygen deprivation or the heavy sedatives. The chaplain arrived later, a kind, gentle woman, who listened with an empathetic smile, but offered platitudes about God's grace and a blessed recovery. There was no real recognition, no genuine understanding. They tried to rationalize it, to fit my cosmic journey into neat medical or theological boxes. My family, when they were finally allowed to see me, reacted with a mixture of immense relief and quiet bewilderment. They rejoiced at my survival, clung to my hand, their eyes shining with tears. When I tried to recount my experience,
their expressions shifted. My mother, devout in her faith, listened with a mixture of awe and apprehension, perhaps seeing it through the lens of divine intervention. My father, more pragmatic, offered a worried, skeptical glance. They didn't dismiss me outright, but their responses were tentative, laced with the unspoken question of whether I was truly all right mentally. It was as if I had spoken a language they couldn't quite comprehend, describing colors they couldn't see. I realized then the immense chasm that separated my reality from theirs. I had returned from a journey that had irrevocably changed me, but the world I had come back to remained stubbornly the same, unable to fully grasp the profound truths I now carried within me.
The man who returned from that helicopter was not the man who entered it. My old life, with its clear boundaries and certainties, had dissolved, replaced by a profound conviction that love is the universe's true language and connection its ultimate purpose. Every moment since has been a journey to live that truth, to infuse every interaction with the unconditional love I experienced beyond the veil. Waking up in that hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile beeps of machinery and the muted whispers of concerned loved ones, I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same. The Thomas who had been a pragmatic, somewhat cynical police officer, focused on the tangible and the observable, was gone. In his place was a man profoundly altered, carrying the indelible imprint of a reality that transcended all earthly understanding. The changes in my life weren't gradual, they were immediate and seismic. My priorities, once centered on career advancement and a comfortable routine, became trivial. The daily grind of police work, which had once felt so meaningful, now seemed to pale in comparison to the vast, interconnected tapestry of existence I had witnessed. Material possessions, the pursuit of status, even the subtle comforts of a predictable life, they all lost their luster. What mattered now was connection, genuine love, and the deep, profound understanding that every moment is a precious gift. I found myself valuing time in a way I never had before, acutely aware of its fleeting nature and the importance of using it purposefully. I stopped worrying about the small annoyances, the things outside my control, because I had seen the grander design, the infinite peace that lay beyond. My worldview shattered and then meticulously reassembled itself, piece by luminous piece. My prior beliefs about life and death, about God and the soul, were not merely challenged, they were obliterated and replaced with direct, undeniable knowledge. Death was no longer the end, the ultimate nothingness. It was a transition, a shedding of the physical form that allowed consciousness to return to its boundless, true nature. The concept of God transformed from a distant, abstract architect into a palpable, all-encompassing presence of unconditional love, the very fabric of the universe. I understood that God wasn't just in heaven. God was heaven, the source of that glorious light, that profound peace, that boundless unity. My soul, I now knew, was not just a theological concept, but an eternal, integral part of this divine tapestry, a spark of the infinite. The life review I experienced was particularly transformative. It wasn't about judgment, but about understanding the ripple effect of my actions, both positive and negative. I saw how even the smallest acts of kindness could resonate outwards, and how moments of impatience or dishonesty could create subtle disharmony. This profound insight didn't burden me with guilt, it empowered me with responsibility. It cultivated a deep sense of empathy I had never fully possessed, making me acutely aware of the interconnectedness of all beings. My philosophy became rooted in a simple yet profound truth. Love is the answer. It's the ultimate reality, the driving force behind all creation, and the path to true fulfillment.
This profound shift didn't come without a new mission. While in that other realm conversing with my grandfather, I had the undeniable sense that ministry was my calling, a path I had perhaps unconsciously ignored. It wasn't about organized religion in the earthly sense, but about serving, about spreading the very love I had experienced. 5 years after my near-death experience, I entered the seminary. This wasn't a sudden whim. It was a deep, unshakable conviction, a response to a divine nudge I could no longer ignore. My purpose became clear: to share this message of unconditional love, to bring comfort and understanding to others, and to live a life aligned with the truths I had witnessed. It was about embodying that love, about treating every interaction as an opportunity to connect on a deeper, soulful level. Integrating this transcendent experience into ordinary life was, and continues to be, my greatest challenge. The chasm between what I had seen and what others perceived was immense. Trying to articulate the ineffable, to put in the human words an experience that transcended all earthly concepts, often led to frustration. The doctors offered medical explanations. The chaplain offered religious comfort, but neither truly grasped the profound personal reality of what I had undergone. There was an unspoken skepticism, a polite dismissal of what was surely a hallucination or a trauma-induced dream. This misunderstanding often created a sense of isolation. How do you explain the taste of pure light, the sound of divine harmony, or the feeling of being one with the universe to someone who has never touched that boundary? I faced moments of profound existential crisis, not because I doubted my experience, but because the world often felt too small, too mundane, after having glimpsed the infinite. There were times I longed to return to that state of pure bliss, to shed the confines of the physical body and re-enter the realm of pure love. But my grandfather's words echoed in my mind: "It is not your time." I understood that my purpose was here in this physical reality, to embody and share the lessons learned. My journey since April 1, 1998 has been one of continuous recalibration, of learning to live a life that honors the sacred truths revealed to me. It's about recognizing the divine in every face, in every moment, and in every breath. It's about moving through the world with an open heart, embracing vulnerability and extending grace wherever possible. The greatest lesson I carried back from the brink was this: love is the fundamental force of the universe, and we are all interconnected by it. It is not just an emotion. It is the very essence of existence, the boundless energy that creates, sustains, and ultimately draws us back to itself. My near-death experience was not an ending, but a profound awakening, a reset button that recalibrated my entire being. It taught me that there is so much more to reality than what our limited senses perceive, that consciousness continues, and that we are watched over by an incredibly loving presence. I hope my story offers not just a glimpse into the unknown, but also a profound sense of hope. Regardless of your beliefs, know that at the deepest core of reality, there is an infinite, unconditional love waiting to embrace us all. Live your days as if they are your last, because they are. Make every moment matter and infuse every interaction with the boundless love that truly is the essence of everything. For in that love, we find our purpose, our peace, and our eternal connection to the divine.
Thank you for watching this story all the way through. It's one of those rare experiences that stays with you, powerful, moving, and full of questions that don't have easy answers. What do you think happens when we die? Was this a real glimpse beyond the veil, or just the brain's final flicker in a moment of crisis? Do you believe in near-death experiences, or are you still on the fence? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Whether you believe or doubt, your voice matters. I read every single one. And if this story touched something deep in you, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. It helps more than you know, and it helps us keep sharing real stories like this one. Take care of yourself and of each other. I'll see you in the next video.